There's a moment every man knows too well, though few ever admit it out loud. It happens in the quiet, in a space that should feel warm, but instead feels unbearably cold. Ryan felt it on a Thursday night, sitting across from the woman he loved in a dim, softly lit restaurant. He had planned everything: her favorite wine, the corner table she always chose, the surprise weekend trip tucked neatly inside a small envelope in his jacket pocket. By all logical measure, tonight should have been perfect. Yet there she was, smiling without warmth, touching her fork more than her food, eyes drifting just beyond him as if something in the air was pulling her away. He kept waiting for the moment she'd soften, the moment her shoulders would relax, the moment she'd look at him the way she used to. But nothing came. Not even when the wine arrived. Not even when he reached across the table and brushed her hand with his thumb. And beneath his practiced calm, something sank. That quiet collapsing inside a man's chest, confusion, frustration, a flicker of resentment, and deeper than all of that, the ache of helplessness. He had done everything right. At least, everything he thought was right. There's a particular kind of sadness that rises when effort and intention don't translate into connection. It's the sadness of a man who built a bridge and watched the person he loves stand on the other side, unwilling or unable to cross. And mixed within that sadness is anger, not at her, but at the invisible rules he keeps failing to understand. It's the bewildering sense that love is a test he never studied for, a game where everyone else seems to know the moves except him. For men like Ryan, and maybe for you, love often feels logical. Do good, be good, provide, protect, show up with grand gestures when things get rough. That's what the world teaches. That's what fathers model. That's what movies promise. So when a woman grows distant despite all of that, it rattles something primal. It whispers the most painful question. What am I still getting wrong? The truth crept in on Ryan quietly, long before he could name it. He had been loving her through the only language he had ever been taught, the language of transaction. Not intentionally, not manipulatively, just habitually. If he fixed a problem, harmony should return. If he bought something beautiful, affection should follow. If he planned something special, closeness should be restored. But to her, each gesture wasn't a symbol of renewal. It was a reminder of the silence in between. A relationship built on logical exchanges can feel safe to a man, because logic is predictable, measurable, earned. But to a woman, love measured in transactions feels strangely hollow, like a melody without rhythm, like a hug without warmth. It doesn't matter how grand the gesture is if the emotional ground beneath it is unstable. A diamond bracelet can't cover a month of emotional absence. A vacation can't heal the subtle ache of not feeling chosen every day. And no matter how well a man performs, he cannot win closeness from a woman who feels unseen. Most men don't realize they're trapped in this pattern. They think connection is something they have to earn through effort. But connection isn't a reward, it's a climate, a texture, a lived experience built moment by moment, not purchased all at once. A woman doesn't withdraw because a man isn't doing enough. She withdraws because something in her heart, her body, her nervous system doesn't feel steady around him. And when a woman's nervous system doesn't feel steady, she doesn't erupt. She doesn't attack. She drifts. Ryan felt that drift long before tonight. It happened in the small pauses when she answered too quickly, in the way she said, "It's fine," with a softness that didn't sound soft at all. In how her laughter became more polite than joyful. In how she folded into herself whenever he tried to fix her stress instead of actually hearing it. But he didn't know how to read any of it. Men are taught to fight, to solve, to build, but rarely to attune. rarely to listen without repairing, rarely to sit in a woman's emotions without trying to tame them. And so he kept doing what he knew: more gestures, more effort, more logic. Every time he felt her slipping, he reached for a bigger offering. But connection doesn't respond to size. It responds to presence. The truth is, most men aren't broken. They're simply unequipped. No one ever taught them the real blueprint of a woman's heart, the emotional architecture that quietly determines whether she leans in or pulls away, whether she trusts or retreats, whether she chooses softness or survival. She doesn't move based on what he gives her, but based on how she feels with him. Inside that restaurant, something in Ryan finally settled. Not in a peaceful way, but in a way that came from no longer being able to avoid the truth. He could feel that this wasn't a night ruined by a bad mood or a long week. This was a signal, a turning point, a moment where the performance stopped working. And for the first time, instead of reaching for the envelope in his jacket, instead of trying to rescue the moment with something grand, he let himself simply look at her. Really look. The faint exhaustion beneath her eyes, the polite way she kept herself small, the protective quietness that wasn't there when they first met. He knew he had to understand what had changed, not in her, but in the way she experienced him. Because the deeper truth is this: a woman doesn't grow distant when she stops loving a man. She grows distant when she stops feeling emotionally safe with him, when the connection becomes something she can't trust, when her heart starts bracing instead of opening. And until a man understands the difference between doing things for her and being present with her, every gesture will land like an apology for something he hasn't yet learned to name. That's the journey Ryan is about to walk into. The shift from performance to presence, from transaction to connection, from logic to attunement. It's the moment a man stops asking, "What should I do?" and begins asking a far braver question: who must I become for her to feel safe with me again? There's a particular silence that settles into a car at night, the kind that isn't peaceful at all. It's the silence of two people moving forward on the road, but not toward each other. Ryan felt it as he drove, his hands steady on the wheel, the streetlights washing over the windshield in long, rhythmic streaks. Beside him, Lisa sat angled slightly toward the window, her knee tucked close, her fingers loosely twisting a strand of hair. When he asked if she was okay, her answer was the familiar one: "I'm fine." Two small words that never meant what they sounded like. There was a faint tightness in her voice, a softness that felt like an apology for something she didn't want to admit. He could sense something brewing, but every time he tried to get her to explain, she retreated further into herself, leaving him with nothing but that infuriating, helpless confusion. The kind that makes a man feel both guilty and angry without knowing which emotion is more justified. He had heard that tone before. Once it would have sparked a long conversation, back when she would tell him everything: her worries, her doubts, the tangled thoughts that made no sense even to her. But now, she kept those parts locked away, as if showing them to him would make everything worse. As if he no longer felt like a safe place to land. The worst part was that he didn't know when that shift happened. Maybe it wasn't a single moment, but a slow, quiet accumulation of tiny disappointments. The times she brought him a fear, and he offered a strategy instead of comfort. The nights she tried to talk through something emotional, and he grew impatient, telling her she was overthinking. The afternoons when she cried about work, and he told her she should stop letting people get to her. Each moment small, each one harmless on its own. But together, they formed a message she didn't know how to say out loud. "My feelings don't feel safe with you anymore." And this was the cruel twist. Ryan wasn't cold. He wasn't unkind. He wasn't dismissive because he didn't care. He dismissed because he cared too much. Because her pain triggered something in him, an urgency to fix, to repair, to make it disappear. He thought problem-solving was love. He thought logic was leadership. He thought solutions were support. But to her, solutions felt like erasure. She didn't want her emotions to be tidied up. She wanted them to be met. What Ryan didn't understand was that emotional safety isn't about eliminating the storm. It's about proving you won't run from it. On that car ride, he kept replaying an argument they had months ago. Lisa had come home frustrated, spiraling about a conflict at work. She had sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, eyes shining in that way they did when she felt overwhelmed. She started telling him about how she felt ignored in a meeting, how her ideas were brushed aside, how small it made her feel. Ryan loved her, and because he loved her, he jumped in with advice so fast it felt like a reflex. You need to speak up more. You're too sensitive about this stuff. Just schedule a meeting with your boss. Don't let them push you around. He remembered the silence that followed. The way she nodded, not because she agreed, but because she was retreating. He didn't realize it then, but that was the moment she stopped sharing the vulnerable parts. Not because she didn't trust him as a partner, but because she didn't trust that he could sit with her emotions without trying to escape them. It's a frightening thing when the woman you love doesn't feel safe unraveling in front of you. It makes a man feel powerless, like he's standing on the outside of a house he built with his own hands, unable to find the key to his own front door. The truth is, emotional safety is less about what a man says and more about the signals a woman's nervous system reads in the pauses between words. She's not scanning for perfection. She's scanning for presence. She's looking for the softness behind his eyes when she shares something messy, the steadiness in his breathing when she cries, the willingness to let her feel without pushing her toward resolution. A woman doesn't shut down because she's dramatic. She shuts down because her body remembers how it felt the last time she opened up. If she felt minimized, she'll hold back this time. If she felt misunderstood, she'll keep things shallow. If she felt judged, she'll shrink. The nervous system is ancient. It learns quickly, and it protects fiercely. Ryan didn't know any of this. He thought being strong meant being composed, unfaltering, rational. But emotional safety isn't built in strength like that. It's built in the courage to stay soft, even when her emotions feel chaotic. It's built in stillness, letting her finish without interrupting, letting her cry without rushing to wipe the tears, letting her speak without preparing an answer. Somewhere on that quiet drive home, he finally understood that "I'm fine" wasn't the problem. It was the symptom. If she couldn't bring her true feelings to him, it meant she was carrying them alone. And the moment a woman feels alone next to the man she loves is the moment distance begins to grow in ways that no gift, no trip, no gesture can repair. The ache inside him wasn't only regret, it was fear. A deep, primal fear of losing her, not to another man, but to silence, to resignation, to the quiet death of connection. He glanced over at her. The soft glow from the passing streetlights brushed her cheek, revealing a sadness she didn't bother hiding anymore. That small vulnerability sparked something inside him. A realization, a grieving, and strangely, a flicker of hope. Because seeing the truth meant he could finally stop trying to fix the wrong thing. What she needed wasn't a solution. She needed a place where her emotions could breathe again. A place where she could fall apart without feeling like a burden. A place where she could say, "I'm not fine," and trust that he wouldn't turn away. And as he drove through the dark, Ryan made a quiet promise. a promise not to change her feelings, but to change the way he meets them. There's a strange heaviness that enters a home long before anyone says a word. Sometimes it's in the way footsteps sound on the hardwood floor, light, careful, almost apologetic. Sometimes it's in the way two people pass each other in the kitchen, polite but distant, like acquaintances trying not to bump shoulders. Ryan noticed it more often now. He would walk through the door after a long day, set his keys on the counter, and call out to Lisa with that familiar enthusiasm he hoped would bridge whatever space had grown between them. But she didn't meet him at the doorway anymore. She'd answer from another room, her voice warm but muted, as though she were waving at him from a distance instead of reaching out with both hands. He could feel something slipping, some invisible thread loosening between them, but he couldn't quite grasp what he had done to make her feel like a guest in her own heart. One night, he arrived home to find her curled up on the couch with a blanket and a mug of tea. She looked peaceful, yet oddly far away, as if her mind was traveling somewhere he couldn't follow. He sat beside her, brushing her leg lightly with his hand. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded. "Just tired. It's been a lot." He wanted to ask what a lot meant. He wanted her to tell him everything, but she didn't. And he felt, painfully, that she didn't because she'd stopped believing he was the place where her a lot belonged. He hated that thought. It made something hot and defensive flare inside him, a mix of sadness and anger he didn't dare show. He was trying. He was doing everything he could to make her feel loved. Planning dates, taking trips, remembering anniversaries, offering solutions. Why did none of it reach her anymore? Why did it feel like the more he did, the more she drifted? The answer revealed itself in the smallest, most ordinary moment. A few days later, on a slow Saturday morning, Ryan looked over at Lisa while she sat reading at the kitchen table. She looked calm, lost in her own world. He realized he had no idea what was happening behind her quiet eyes. Not because she was secretive, but because he hadn't truly entered her world in a long time. He had checked boxes. He had maintained the surface. But he hadn't carved out space for intimacy in the small, everyday ways that matter far more than grand surprises. A memory hit him with unexpected force, back when they first started dating. How he'd text her good morning before he even brushed his teeth. How he'd send her small notes during the day, not as proof of effort, but because she was simply on his mind. How he used to ask her questions that weren't just about logistics, but about her inner life. What made her laugh? What scared her? What dreams she had tucked away? How she used to glow when she talked to him. He missed that version of her. He missed that version of himself. Somewhere along the relationship, the rhythm had shifted. Life got busier. Work asked for more. Routine settled in. The spark of intentional presence, those little signals that whisper, "You matter, you're chosen, you're my person," faded under the noise. He knew he still loved her fiercely, but he had stopped showing her in the way she could feel. The thought stung. It felt unfair and humbling at the same time. She wasn't asking to be worshipped. She wasn't asking to be placed above everything. She just wanted to know, without having to beg or hint or break down, that she was a consistent, non-negotiable part of his emotional world. Not an obligation, not a task, not a role, a priority. So he tried something different that night. When she sat beside him on the couch, scrolling through her phone, he placed his hand gently over hers. Not in a needy way, not in a performative way, just in a quiet, grounded way that said he was fully there. "How are you, really?" he asked. Her eyes lifted from the screen, surprised. Not suspicious, just unprepared for the depth behind the question. "I don't know," she whispered. "Just overwhelmed." He didn't fix. He didn't rationalize. He didn't say she was strong or capable or making too much of things. He simply nodded. "I'm here," he said. "Tell me what's been sitting on your chest." Her breath shook a little, not from fear, but from relief. Something inside her softened, as if a door she kept locked had finally dared to crack open again. For the first time in months, she talked. Not about errands or schedules or responsibilities, but about the weight she'd been carrying silently. About the feeling of being stretched thin. About how lonely she'd felt, even with him right beside her. About how she missed the version of him who used to slow down and notice her. Her voice trembled with sadness, and his heart clenched because he knew every word was true. It wasn't the big things that had pushed her away. It was the absence of small things. The little check-ins. The quiet moments of curiosity. The simple, focused presence that tells a person they matter even when life is chaotic. He realized then that priority isn't something you declare with your words. It's something you prove in the way you look at someone when they speak. In the way you listen without rushing. In the way you make space, not for the highlight moments, but for the soft, ordinary ones. A woman knows she's loved not when a man shows up dramatically, but when he shows up consistently. As she rested her head on his shoulder, something in the air shifted. It wasn't a cinematic breakthrough. It was subtle, gentle, fragile, like the beginning of something that could be rebuilt if he tended to it carefully. And for the first time in a long while, Ryan felt her lean into him. Not out of habit, but out of trust beginning to return, thread by quiet thread. There's a particular kind of quiet that follows two people into a bedroom when they've been drifting apart. It isn't the gentle kind, the kind that feels like safety, like belonging. It's the kind that wraps itself around the room like a thin film of glass. You move, and it feels like you might break something. You reach out, and the air tenses before she does. Ryan felt that tension the moment he closed the door behind him. The soft lamp glow spilled across the sheets, and Lisa was sitting on the edge of the bed, tying her hair back the way she did when she was trying not to think too deeply. He walked toward her with good intentions, with the kind of longing that had once been easy between them. But when he wrapped his arms around her from behind, he felt her entire body inhale a small, sharp breath he had learned to recognize. Not panic, not rejection, just a tightening, as if her whole nervous system was bracing. He froze. He wasn't sure when affection had become something she needed to prepare for. He wasn't sure when touch had shifted from connection to expectation. He wasn't sure when a simple embrace had stopped being simple. He let his hands fall slowly to her waist and stepped back. She glanced over her shoulder, guilt flickering across her face. That guilt stabbed him more deeply than the tension had. She didn't want to hurt him. She didn't want to pull away. But something in her body had already decided before her mind could soften the blow. He sat on the other side of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck, swallowing the tightness in his throat. He wondered, painfully, if she found him less attractive. If she was bored of him. If she was comparing him to some invisible standard he didn't know how to meet. It's cruel, the way the human mind turns emotional distance into a personal flaw. He didn't know that what she felt had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with safety. Not physical safety, the emotional kind. The kind built long before hands ever touch skin. He didn't know that for women, intimacy begins hours, sometimes days before anything physical happens. He didn't know that her body couldn't open in a moment that her heart didn't feel prepared for. He didn't realize that the scenic route she needed wasn't about romance or theatrics. It was about pacing, patience. presence. Earlier that day, he had brushed past her in the kitchen without really looking at her. He had checked his phone during dinner more times than he realized. He had rushed through conversations, giving her half attention while thinking about work. To him, these moments were tiny, forgettable. To her, they were the slow drip of disconnection. By the time they reached the bedroom, the space where intimacy used to bloom was now crowded with unresolved silences. A woman's body remembers the emotional tone of the day. If she didn't feel cherished, she can't suddenly shift into desire simply because he is ready. It isn't stubbornness. It isn't withholding. It's biology. When she doesn't feel safe emotionally, her nervous system stays guarded. And when she stays guarded, closeness feels like a burden instead of a bridge. Ryan didn't know any of that. All he knew was the sting in his chest, the mix of embarrassment and confusion, and the heavy, aching sense that he was losing her in ways he didn't know how to fix. He sat there for a moment, watching her untie her hair again, her fingers trembling just slightly. It hit him that the tightening he felt when she flinched wasn't anger. It was sadness. It was grief, quiet and unexpected, over the simplicity they used to share. He missed the way she used to melt into him without hesitation. He missed the way she looked at him with that unguarded softness. He missed feeling like her touch wasn't something he had to earn. He wanted that back, not the performance of closeness, but the ease of it. So he tried something he hadn't done in a long time. He moved closer, but not with hunger or expectation. He moved with intention. He reached out and placed his hand gently on her back, not to pull her in, but just to be there. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he whispered. "I just want to be close to you, that's all." Her shoulders dropped. Not dramatically, just a small, almost imperceptible release. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if taking in the tone of his voice, weighing it against the history of their recent nights. He didn't lean in further. He didn't rush. He didn't try to spark something. He simply stayed present, letting his hand rest without moving. A quiet warmth spread through the space between them, fragile but real. Eventually, she turned and looked at him, not with desire, but with something more important: relief. That mix of sadness and gratitude a woman feels when a man finally meets her where she is instead of where he expects her to be. "I miss us," she said softly. Those 3 words cracked something open. Not a full reconciliation, not magic, not instant closeness, but a door, a beginning. Ryan felt it too. The longing, the grief, the tenderness. The anger he once directed at himself faded into something gentler, a kind of compassion for the man he had been. The man trying so hard in all the wrong ways. He brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. Not as an invitation, not as a performance, just as a moment of affection untethered from expectation. Her eyes softened. Her hand found his, lacing their fingers slowly, as though her body was remembering what safety felt like, one breath at a time. The scenic route wasn't about seduction. It was about rebuilding the path that led her to trust him with her most vulnerable self. It was about giving her space to arrive at intimacy, not dragging her toward it. It was about reminding her that closeness with him wasn't something she had to brace for. And as she leaned into him tentatively, gently, vulnerably, Ryan realized that intimacy wasn't something he had to chase. It was something he had to earn, by creating the emotional landscape where her body no longer felt the need to protect itself from him. For the first time in a long while, their closeness didn't feel forced. It felt like something rediscovered, something that had been waiting beneath the surface, patient and quiet, simply needing a safe place to rise again. There's a kind of quiet clarity that comes to a man only after he's been humbled by love. After he's seen the consequences of drifting, after he's felt the sting of watching a woman he cares about slowly lose the softness she once gave so freely. Ryan felt that clarity settling into him in small, steady waves, not dramatic, not triumphant, just real, just honest. The kind of truth that arrives when you stop trying to win someone back and start trying to understand yourself. Days passed with a gentleness they hadn't shared in a long time. Lisa wasn't suddenly overflowing with affection, but something important had changed. She stayed close when he reached for her. She spoke more openly during their quiet moments. The silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a pause, an intentional one, filled with possibility. One evening, they sat outside on the small balcony overlooking the neighborhood. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain even though the sky was clear. Lisa rested her legs over his, absently tracing shapes on his arm with her fingertips. It was subtle, but the gesture made something inside him lift. Joy, gratitude, and a fragile hope that frightened him almost as much as it comforted him. He turned to her.
"I've been thinking a lot," he said, voice steady. "About us. About me." Her hand stilled on his arm. Not with fear, just attention. The kind she once gave him easily. "I didn't realize how passive I'd become," he admitted. "Always asking what you wanted. Always stepping back so you wouldn't think I was controlling. I thought I was being respectful. But I think I was just disappearing." Her eyes softened, but she didn't rush to correct him. She let him speak. Maybe she sensed he needed to say this out loud, not for her, but for himself. "I didn't understand," he continued, "that stepping back was its own kind of burden for you. That you didn't want to make every decision. That you wanted to feel me take the lead sometimes, not to overpower you, but to show you I'm here, present, with purpose." A small breath escaped her, half relief, half sorrow. "I missed that," she whispered. The confession hit him harder than he expected. Not as blame, but as truth. A truth he could finally hear without defensiveness, without shame. For the first time, he wasn't trying to justify anything. He was trying to grow. He leaned back in his chair and let the night settle around them. The glow from inside cast a warm halo over her face, and he wondered how he could have ever thought she needed him to be smaller to make her comfortable. She had fallen for him when he was bold, when he was passionate, when he had plans and opinions and a fire in his chest about the life he wanted to build. She hadn't wanted a dictator, but she also hadn't wanted a ghost. Somewhere along the way, he had dimmed himself without noticing. But dimming himself hadn't protected her. It had only left her feeling alone. He reached for her hand again. "I want to lead better," he said, the words quiet but certain. "Not by making the decisions for us, but by taking responsibility for the shape of our life together. I want you to feel like you can relax with me, like you don't always have to be the one steering." She looked at him with a tenderness he hadn't seen in months. It wasn't desire, it wasn't admiration. It was trust, still small, but alive. And trust, once reborn, is something a woman nurtures fiercely. Ryan felt a warmth settle in his chest, something deeper than happiness, something closer to purpose. Not the grand, heroic kind, but the kind that makes a man straighten his spine and breathe a little more fully. The kind that reminds him he is capable of being more than he has been. That night, long after Lisa had gone to bed, Ryan stayed awake on the balcony. He stared at the dark sky, the stars faint but steady, and understood something he had missed for so long. Women don't want perfect men. They don't even want men who always know what to do. They want men who move with intention, who show up with courage, who take emotional responsibility for the space they share. They want men who don't vanish into passiveness but stand present, willing to initiate, willing to admit mistakes, willing to try again with a fuller heart.
And beneath all of that, beneath emotional safety, affection, presence, and leadership, there was one thing he had overlooked: his own life. For too long, Ryan had drifted from himself. He had put his hobbies aside, let his friendships wilt, quieted the ambitions that once made his eyes light up. He thought devotion meant shrinking his world to fit hers, but all that did was strip away the texture that once drew her in. A woman doesn't fall in love with a man who orbitates her. She falls for the man who has gravity, his own pull, his own fire, his own direction. The man whose purpose makes her admire him, not because he chooses his dreams over her, but because he carries both with a steady, wholehearted stride. Ryan could feel a version of himself returning, a version not defined by fear or passiveness, but by clarity. He didn't want to lead Lisa. He wanted to lead himself, and from that grounded place, offer her the kind of partnership she could relax into. The next morning, he woke early. He made coffee. He sat beside her as she stirred awake and kissed her forehead gently, not as a routine gesture, but as a vow. A quiet, steady vow to be consistent, to be intentional, to be the man who doesn't try to earn her love through performance, but earns her trust through who he chooses to become every day. When she opened her eyes and smiled softly, really smiled, he felt something inside him anchor, not to her, but to the man he was becoming. And from that place, he knew their bond could rebuild, not because he chased it, but because he finally understood how to hold it.